We continue with our focus on the South African economy, and poor South Africans are particularly hard hit by even the slightest increases in the price of basic food. Government should have better food price controls in place. That's what we're hearing. That is the opinion of three researchers. One of them is Refiloe Joala. She's affiliated to the Institute for Poverty, Land and Agrarian Studies at the University of the Western Cape. Refiloe joins us by Skype this afternoon. And Refiloe, afternoon to you. Always good to speak to you. Let me start with one of the bits from your article where you say failure to enact specific legislation on food rights has resulted in incoherent food policies. Break that down to those of us who aren't researchers.
Hi, Thembekile. Thank you for having me again. So the issue around the right to food in South Africa, our constitution recognizes the right to food and is among the few in the world that does. However, unlike other socio-economic rights like the right to housing, to work and social grants, for instance, there is no specific legislation on the right to food in South Africa. And so you find that at policy level, there's a lot of incoherency as food security programs are implemented by 5 different departments that don't actually speak to one another in terms of how the programs are carried out and implemented on the ground.
And why is there that lack of communication, given that South Africa is, sadly, a majority poor country, and a lot of the poor people in this country, the low-income earners, spend quite a lot of their income on transport and food?
Yes, as I mentioned, we don't have a comprehensive food security legislation, nor do we have a comprehensive food security policy. At present, the food security mandate primarily lies with the new amalgamated Department of Agriculture, Rural Development and Land Reform. They are mandated with implementing food security projects that mainly focus on production among smallholder farmers. Unfortunately, these programs don't necessarily speak to other food security programs, such as the National School Feeding Scheme. For instance, they could be procuring from the farmers that are being supported through agriculture programs, but that's not the case. And also when we look at what the Department for Social Development is doing in terms of food provision for poor and vulnerable individuals and households, the food that's being distributed through these programs is not necessarily food that's coming from smallholder farmers. It's a lot of it comes from the private sector, from large retail. So there isn't real coherence in terms of a broader food security program in the country.
And just taking a glance at your summary, you referred to the informal food vendors in the country. That was quite a hot topic at the start of the lockdown when government said they would not be allowed to sell food, fresh produce on the side of the road, but majority of poor South Africans rely on them to be able to buy 6 tomatoes for less than 20 rand. So why aren't we directing more resources to people such as those? Because they do play a crucial part in feeding poor South Africans.
Precisely. Unfortunately, policy has failed to date to respond to the needs and the nature of the informal food sector, which is an important source of food security, but also livelihoods for millions of South Africans living with low incomes across the country. If you look at some of the policies and pieces of legislation that do exist to address informal to address the informal economy and actors within that sector, it's around zoning and trying to formalize the informal, not realizing that the very specific nature of this sector allows for livelihood strategies and for people living on low incomes to survive and to strategize around their incomes. They're able to purchase food in smaller packages. They're able to purchase food on credit and so forth. These are services that are generally not available in the formal sector, and trying to formalize the sector is not the only solution, and government so far hasn't shown an openness to that. Where there's been infrastructure development to support smallholder farmers, to support actors in the informal sector, you find that the infrastructure is not necessarily responding to their needs, and sometimes moving them away from where there's foot traffic of people who rely on the informal sector for their food purchases.
Very quickly, you talked about expanding or adding more items to the essential foods basket. How quickly can that be done?
Well, that's a demand that we make in the article. 9 days before the lockdown in March, the Minister of the Department of Trade and Industry announced 22 products and categories of items that need to be closely watched by the National Consumer Commission and the Competition Commission to make sure that there aren't any unjustified increases for health products and food items. But of the 800 complaints that have been laid with the Competition Commission so far, 30% relate to food items being unjustly increased. Mm-hmm. So we are calling for that list, which currently only consists of 11 food items, to be increased. For instance, brown bread, which is a staple for the majority of South African households, is not on that list, as well as legumes and other dry fruits and vegetables that are important for people's nutrition are not on that list. So we are calling for the expansion of it.
Refiloe Joala, thank you so much for speaking to us.